When you think about looping, there's lots to consider before you even get to the stage. And in this video, we're going to talk about 10 things to get you gig ready with a looper. Now, the first one is real simple. It's choose a looper. Or is it simple? You have to consider whether it's a foot-based looper or whether it's an app-based looper or a tabletop-based looper. If you're playing an instrument, you might find it easier to use a floor-based one, whereas if you're DJing or maybe you've got one hand free, playing piano parts and synth parts, you might find it easier with a tabletop or an app. Having said all of that, you can get a floor-based looper and still attach on things like a controller, which is an app for it. So you can use both if you really wanted to. Or you get a tabletop looper and then add on a MIDI pedal or a floor pedal. So you can technically have both. All I would say is don't change your entire setup for the looper unless you're wanting to become a loop artist. If you just want to add it to your arsenal, think about how you perform and how you would use that kind of looper. The next one is practice with that looper. The great thing about a looper is it loops you back. So if you're practicing your guitar parts, your vocals, your harmonies, you're going to get that instant feedback and hear how it sounds. Most musicians don't actually hear how they sound on stage exactly the same as you're going to hear it as the audience do. Yes, you might have in-ear monitors or you might have a monitor on stage, but with a looper, what you put into it is exactly what you're going to get out. So practice your timing, your structure, and if you're a bit stuck about that, stick around to the end because I'm going to show you how you can practice with me. Now the next one is a little bit difficult because it depends on what kind of looping you're doing, but plan your set list. If you're someone who's doing a lot of covers or if you're doing your own stuff, it depends what environment you're in, if you're in a local pub or if you're on stage. Now with some loopers, they have memories and you can just go next memory, next memory, next memory, and you can have preloaded stuff in there, or maybe you're looping everything from scratch. Think about how you're going to keep the audience engaged by not looping too much at the very beginning and making it your own. We'll get into that in a minute. Now, a misconception with a lot of people is when they loop at home or they practice with a looper at home and they go onto a stage, they think their levels are going to be fine. They just plug in and play. You need to check your levels because they will not be correct. When you hand this over to a sound engineer or you're plugging it into someone else's speaker, it's going to sound different. The advantage is you can create a loop and actually walk away from the system and walk to the front of house and just hear how it sounds. Now with certain loopers, you can tweak the EQ, you can tweak the effects, and you can make sure you sound the best. The other thing I've found, certainly when you're working on a bigger environment, is really have that conversation if you have a sound engineer. I could give a left and a right out to a sound engineer, a little bit like a CD or an MP3 player, or with things like the RC600 or the 505 or the Headrush, I can give them multiple outs, all doing different things. The key one here is if you're using your own effects, you need to tell the sound engineer to actually run it flat. Don't put reverb on it, don't put echoes or delays on it, because if you've got your own and then they put it on top, it's going to be double trouble on stage when it comes to effects, and it's going to sound really off. I'm frequently telling a sound engineer if I'm just coming into a gig, when I do a sound check, no effects please, and only a small amount of the looper coming through to the monitors because I don't want it to bleed back into the microphone. If I'm using in-ear monitors, that's not an issue. And if I'm giving them multiple outs, I will tell them which one's which, of course. But again, they might be tempted to use effects on your vocals and guitar and not the looper. But just be careful with that because it's not how it's going to sound in the looper because it's a post effect outside of what you're delivering. So I suppose the answer to this one is communication. Make sure that you sound the way you want to sound, either in a local environment, a local pub or a local party, or if you have a sound engineer with you, have that conversation beforehand about how it's going to sound. This next one has genuinely jumped on me a couple of times in the past decade. Check you've got everything before you leave. Now, this isn't just for loopers, this is for any musician. If I've unpacked all my stuff and I've been practicing in this room and then I've got a gig and I take everything to the gig and I go, great, I've got everything, and I actually haven't, it can completely destroy your performance. Now, if you miss a cable, it's not too bad, but if you've missed the part that you need to plug into the looper, you can't loop. Make sure you've got everything. Do what I call the idiot check before you leave the room to make sure you've got everything in the bag, and then you can put on a stellar performance. Now this next one is really about if you're in a location that isn't a stage, but it does have some advantages to the ones that isn't a stage. And this one is all about location. where you're standing versus where the PA is. If I'm in a local bar and I'm using my own PA, I'll try and put the speakers in front of me. So imagine that I'm standing this, pointing that way. I try and put the speakers in front of me because, again, I don't want the bleed of that speaker going into the microphone and then going into the looper. If you're on stage and there is monitors and all the monitors are switched on, I will actually ask the sound engineer if the monitors can be turned down or off apart from one. And with that monitor, only a little bit coming through. And that's obviously what a sound check is for. If you're using a looper just for your guitar, that's not too much of an issue, but really this is to do with microphones and microphone bleed. Now, if you can't control the condition of where you are, like for example, there's a local area I play and you're just shoved in the corner, then try and control it from the looper's end. Maybe you can put the effect of a gate, so under a certain volume, it doesn't kick in. And the big one, of course, is you don't want any feedback. So make sure in the sound check that you're able to play one of the loudest songs you do with the looper, with loads of things going, to give you the best opportunity to make a stellar performance. Okay, so that's all the sound checky kind of stuff. Let's go over to looping itself. The next one is be creative. I've seen so many different artists use loop pedals, of course. And at the start of my journey, even in a couple of years in, I fell into this trap of putting everything down exactly as it sounded on the record. Be creative. Do your own version with the looper. You may just need to put a little bit of a beat down and then do the first verse. Then, when you come to the chorus, then start putting the bass line down. You don't have to do it exactly as the CD or the MP3 or the record sounds. This is really more about replicating a cover. And yes, the people want to sing along in the order, and that's fine. But my tip for this is to make sure that you are still keeping the audience engaged. I've seen many artists use a looper and they've looped everything. They look up, it's been 3 minutes and everyone's bored. You need to keep it creative. You need to make sure that you're engaging with the audience as well as looping. And that's a hard technique to do, and I'm still learning myself with more than 15 years of looping behind me. That is part of the live looping skill set, to make sure that you're keeping your audience engaged, you're getting the parts in that you want on your looper, but it also sounds unique enough that people like it. So have a look at the songs that you do, get your phone and film yourself recording that loop. What does it look like to the audience on the way back? You may be surprised. So you got your set list, you've set up, and it's all great. And then someone asks you, can you play that tune? You need to be flexible and adaptable, even with a looper, because you actually can become very structured. The other thing you need to be adaptable for is when it goes wrong. And believe me, it does. I've done it. We've all done it. And what happens when that loop goes wrong? I've actually done a loop before and I was like, that's wrong. I need to delete part of that and put it on again. And at the end of the gig, people didn't even realize. You'll know because you know you did it not the way you want to. It was actually one of my own songs. People didn't realise. They thought I created the loop, took it off again, and put something else on. There's an old phrase which is, you actually learn from your mistakes, you don't learn from success. Now, I've had a situation where I pressed the wrong button on the looper and deleted the entire loop. It just went silent and I had to think on my feet and just carry on playing and build it back up again. These are things that I can't really teach you. I could show you lots of different mistakes, maybe how to overcome them, but you just have to wait for them to happen to you. Now, I do have examples of mistakes, and that is in my course, which is How to Loop Like a Pro. I'm going to talk about that right at the end. The fun one is learn from others. You've probably watched a load of YouTube videos about looping techniques. What I'd certainly do is look at looping performances. Watch a load of performances of how people create stuff. And don't just watch your genre, go and watch something else. I am really interested in how people loop when they beatbox on things like Swizz Beats, but also how people integrate loopers into bands. Now, I don't do that myself, but I'm really interested about that because of the structure of the song and the techniques. So learn from lots of different loop artists and then take in what they've done, watch them very carefully and see if you can replicate it at home. And the 10th one is just have some fun with it. Looping is a fantastic creation tool, and also it's a great performance tool as well. You can be a solo artist and sound like an entire band, get the whole place jumping, or you can create an entire choir on your own with just one voice and looping it lots of times. Now, my bonus thing is I've got a course, as I said before, called How to Loop Like a Pro. This is a beginners to intermediate course, and if you're interested in this, I also have courses on the RC500 and the RC600. I'm building a couple more courses this year, but I now have a subscription. So instead of paying $149 for the course, you can trial it out at $15 a month. There's a link in the description box if you want to go and check it out, and by doing that, you're helping this channel directly and helping me. But it means I can help you, and you get access to all my courses for just $15 a month, and if you're in the UK, it works out around about £11. So please check the link in the description box, and you can sign up straight away there. Now, I said to you before about learning from others and looking at performances. Check out this playlist. This is all the songs that I've done on the RC600, the Headrush Looper board, and RC500, lots of different versions, even things like Loopy Pro. It's all my performances bundled in as a playlist. A lot of them do have instructional stuff before or after the song. Go and have a look. Go and learn something new from me. And of course, check out the link underneath for the course. See you later.